static and dynamic website. What's a static website? A static website, by definition, is any site that has fixed or stagnant content, usually written in HTML code. Now, here are some ways that you can easily identify static websites. Number one, every page of a static website will have the code written separately, just as you see it on the web. Number two, every page has to be saved separately on the server. Number three, changes have to be made manually every time, and you need coding knowledge to make any and all changes. So what do I mean by this? For those who are new to websites or you want to learn a little bit more about static websites, I think it's easier if you have a better understanding of a typical structure of a website. So here are some common elements that you deal with day to day when you're building a website. The header section, for example, contains your logo, your menu bar. The sidebars and the footer might contain miscellaneous information, additional information, miscellaneous links, social icons. And the most important part would be the content. The content would contain page-specific information that you want to kind of give to your customers. Now, keeping this in mind, let's take a look at some examples of sites that I've completed in the past. Now, this is a accounting website that I completed several years ago for a client of mine. It's a static website. This is a loan website that I've completed, and I'm going to use this as my reference. And I'm going to use the About Us page in specific as my reference. Now, one thing about static websites is everything that you see on this page, all the graphical and the non-graphical elements that you see, they have to be coded and saved exactly as you see it on here. And they have to be saved in a separate file all the time. So all of the links that you see up on top, they correspond to a different page, and each page corresponds to a different file on your server. So if you look at the back end of the website, you will see that there is a file correspond to every single file on this website. Now let's think about it for a second. If you're thinking about a site with 20 pages, for example, you're going to have 20 pages that governs all the information on your website. So any change that you want to make, for example, let's say you want to change this section from About Us and you want to change it to About. You have to open all these 20 pages and make the change accordingly, because if you don't, the change won't reflect. Wouldn't that be troublesome? So that brings me to my next point in my tutorial, which is going to be the pros and cons, or the advantages and disadvantages of statical websites. Advantages: it's easier to develop, it's cheaper to develop, and cheaper to host. In contrast, the disadvantages: you definitely need web development expertise to update the site, and the changes can be time consuming. Once again, 20 pages might mean you have to open 20 pages in order for you to make a simple change. The site might not be user friendly, and the information might be stagnant because it's really hard to update. So quite literally, if you have a static website in the year 2015, you are a dinosaur. You need to update your site and probably look at getting a dynamic website, which brings me to my next point. What is a dynamic website? A dynamic website is a site whose construction is controlled by an application server processed by its server-side scripts. What do I mean by this? Number one, what this means: in a dynamic website, pages do not actually exist and they're not saved separately. What does exist is number two, the design files or the template files. The template files govern the look and the feel of the website and the structure of how you want to organize it. The corresponding content for a specific page, they are saved in databases, and that's saved separately. So what happens is any request to view a page of a dynamic website automatically populates all this information together and puts them accordingly so that you can view the page. Let's discuss this in a little bit more detail. I'm going to go back to the structure of a website so that I can explain it to you better. Now, in a dynamic website, what they've done is they've identified common elements that's in a web page. So here's an example. The header might be a common element, the sidebar a common element, the footer a common element. So in an essence, the only thing that actually changes is the specific content from page to page. They've understood this. So what's going to happen is a request to view a page. When the server gets that request, it gathers all this information, the header element, the menu, the sidebars, the footer, and the content specific to that page, and they're going to put it together at the given moment. And they're going to organize it a certain way according to the template file that we specified. So it can look like this, or it can look like this. As you can see, there's a little bit of a difference as far as how it's organized, but the common elements are very clear. So this is why it's easier to manage a dynamic website. So let me give you an example. So let's say you want to change one section. Let's say you want to change something in the menu. All you have to do is identify where you want to change things in the menu, and because this element is saved separately on the server, all you have to do is go and edit the menu page. One change at the menu section will effectively change everything on the whole site, whether it be 100 pages or 1,000 pages. The menu is going to change all throughout. So I'm gonna show you my website. Now this is my website. This is done on a WordPress CMS, a content management system. It's a dynamic website, and I'm going to reference two pages in specific. Now, number one being the About Us page, and secondly the testimonial page. So as you can see, you can easily identify common elements in this site. Pages that don't change from page to page. The logo doesn't change, the menu doesn't change, the sidebars don't change. So it would be much easier for me to identify what I want to change, and since it is saved in a separate location. So should I want to change anything in the menu, all I have to do is go to the section where I've saved my menu and change it accordingly. Once I make that change in the menu, it'll effectively take change in all throughout the website. So that would actually be one of the biggest advantages of a dynamic website. Moving on to my next point, which is going to be the advantages and disadvantages of a dynamic website. Here are some advantages. They're much more functional, much easier to update and maintain, much easier to add new content and pages. So this will essentially help you to gain more customers, help with search engine optimization, and you can actually have a staff working together in collaboration, because they don't have to worry about editing 20 different pages and picking up from where somebody else left off. Now, are there disadvantages? Of course there are. But in retrospect, it's definitely worth it. What are some of the disadvantages of dynamic websites? They are much more expensive to develop because there's much more coding to do. So it's gonna actually take more longer to develop initially.